Hello and welcome back. My name is Sarah and today we are talking about books, more specifically the books that I managed to read in June. Now I'm going to be honest with you, there aren't a huge amount to talk about this month and that's okay. Sometimes you read loads, sometimes you read a handful, it's all groovy. Nevertheless, I am really excited to talk about the books that I did read with you today. That being said, I think we should just dive right in. So grab yourself a drink, get cozy and I'll check in with you at the end. Let's go! I'm coming to you having finished my first book of the month. So what I'm going to talk about is Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes. This book is a retelling of the story of Medusa. From the first page, you can tell that this is not going to be a carbon copy of the original myth. Anyone who was told the original story of Medusa would have been told a story where she was the monster. But this novel is incredibly sympathetic towards Medusa and retells the story to highlight all of the awful things that are done to her for genuinely no good reason. None. Perseus in particular is painted in a particularly unflattering light, and it puts a great spin on the original story, which often leans in the favour of men and men dominating over women. Natalie Haynes uses so many different perspectives and some of them are actually really fun. For example, like one of the chapters is narrated by a crow, which is just a great time. It's also incredibly witty at points, which is much needed for some of the tragedies and the topics that are actually covered in the book. And that leads me very nicely just to let you know a couple of content warnings of the book, which are mainly multiple accounts of sexual assault and also violence. I mean, it's Greek mythology, so it kind of comes with the territory, but just as a heads up. Overall, I had a lot of fun reading Stoneblind. So if you're in the mood for a proper mythological story, or even just something that will ease you back into reading, this could be a really great pick. And yeah, I thought it was great, and I'm here for retelling stories in favour of women, especially those who are mistreated and given a bad rep when they don't deserve it. So yeah, Medusa stan. I have just finished The Gray Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is not my first time reading this book, so it was a reread, but the last time I read it was for studying purposes many years ago, so it was a real treat to get to read this just for pleasure. F. Scott Fitzgerald has such an incredible way with words, and it's definitely one of the classics that I think is worth reading if you've not already read it. It seems kind of silly almost to think that I need to explain this book. I think majority of people, if they haven't read it, at least know the basic overview of the plot. We follow a multitude of characters, but predominantly Gray Gatsby, who is kind of this self-made rich man who's completely helplessly in love with a woman who we also meet in the book. This is a really short book, and so it's kind of like a snapshot account of one man's encounter with this group of people. It's really interesting, the writing is completely sublime, and I would absolutely recommend it, especially as a summer read, for a couple of reasons. One is that, as I said, it's super short, super lightweight. If you're going on holiday, there's no excuse not to put this in your suitcase. The second is because of the time of year that this is set. The majority of the story is set in the summertime in New York, so you get a lot of that completely visceral heat that translates wonderfully through the pages. So if you're like me and you like to read things seasonally, this will be perfect. It's a really fun book in moments, it's sad in moments, it's very frustrating in moments. If you also haven't read it since you studied it, would recommend. It holds up and it's nice to read it in a new light as well. So book 2, done. Hello, I have recently finished listening to Seed to Dust by Mark Hamer, which I would describe as a memoir. The book is set up into 12 parts which cover the month of the year, and those sections or months talk kind of in depth about specific garden varieties of plants, but then links it with really personal stories. A lot of the stories relate to himself and his job as a gardener for an old lady called Mrs. Cashmere. It's a very deeply personal story. I will say sometimes it does feel a little bit
rambling. A lot of it is very descriptive, there's not a huge amount of dialogue, but each to their own. It might not be your cup of tea, it might be just up your street. I personally continue to listen to most of it because I really liked the narrator's voice. I forget who narrated the audiobook, but it was a really calming read for the majority of it, or a listen in my case. It was nice to feel connected to the natural world, but through another person's life story. But yeah, it was enjoyable. If you're into gardening and if you're into memoirs, and especially from a slightly older person's point of view, give it a try, give it a listen, let me know what you think. Greetings. The next book that I have to talk about is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The book follows the main character, Nora Seed. She is incredibly depressed, and as we meet her, she decides to take her life. We then wake up with her in somewhere called the Midnight Library, and this is a place where she can experience different lives that she could have lived and see if she'd made different choices, what those lives might have turned out to be like. It very much delves into the idea of parallel worlds. How much of this is scientifically accurate? I couldn't tell you. It's about regret, it's about hope, it's about second, third, fourth chances, living for what really matters to you and the most important things in life, which are the people around you and the good that you can do for other people as well. It's a very heartwarming read. I think I would give it 4 stars. It was really, really good. And who doesn't love a good book that's set in a fantastical library? I know I'm in.
The last and final book that I have here is The Muse by Jessie Burton. This is a historical fiction with a dual storyline. One storyline is set in 1960s London from the perspective of Odelle Bastian, an aspiring writer and poet who works as a typist at the Skelton Gallery in London. She is employed by the very mysterious Marjorie Quick, and while she is working here, a lost masterpiece is made known to the gallery, and her employer clearly knows more than she is willing to let on. Now, the secondary storyline follows Olive Schloss, who is the daughter of a renowned art dealer, and is set some years prior in 1930s Spain. A brother and a sister also become deeply entwined with her and her family's life, and we become privy to Olive's own ambitions in this storyline, which is all set against the backdrop of the looming Spanish Civil War. This is an intricately woven mystery, which throughout the 2 timelines, we as the reader come to understand the provenance of the painting in question. It's also very well grounded in female friendships and love. If you love art and art history, this book is very well researched, and the way that the paint and painting processes are described are very vivid, very true to life, and very beautiful. This book also looks at the kind of dichotomy, the idea of the art and the artist being both completely inseparable and also completely removed from one another, as well as the pursuit of pure creation and inspiration as well. This book really delivered on plot and pacing for me, and the writing is solid. There's enough technical phrases to make it interesting, but the dialogue and the prose is very, very engaging, and there is plenty of tension building throughout this. I thought it was fantastic. And that, dear friends, concludes all of the books that I managed to read in June. I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to let me know what you are reading and enjoying below, and I will see you in another one very soon. Take care.